Hello.
Hello, is this Yvette?
It is. Hi, I recognize that voice.
Hi, this is Drayton Michaels. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Now I'm talking to one of my favorite people on the internet.
Oh, right back at ya.
Thanks. Awesome. Welcome to 8 Limbs. We're speaking with Yvette Van Veen from Ontario, Canada, and we're going to be talking about dog training and dog training culture. Yvette, how are you this evening, and welcome to 8 Limbs.
Hi, Drayton. I'm fantastic. I am thrilled to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're going to let the listeners know that we literally were like two junkies in a shooting gallery on the phone. Just, oh my God, dog training, dogs. Like, we didn't even get to start the show officially, and we jumped in. So I love the passion. Please let everybody know that's listening how long you've been dog training and doing behavior consulting.
Professionally, with my own company, we're coming up to 15 years.
What's the name of your company?
Awesome Dogs, and
Nice.
we're just outside of London, Ontario, so in Dorchester. And then before that, sort of went through the older school process of, mentoring under other trainers. Sort of that was just before the time when all the how to be a dog trainer stuff started. So I went through that. So we're probably well over 20 years now, yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Now, when you started out, were you always a positive reward-based trainer, or were you a crossover? Were you doing some aversive methods and approaches?
When I started out, my sort of first experience with dog training was primarily using a lot of sort of that bull heart, lure and correct type stuff. So I guess in today's standards, that would be called balance, so or whatever that means. But I gotta love the terms. It's like, whatever that means, that word. Where now I was lucky that the person who I'm worked under actually had decent knowledge in terms of the science, including on the correction side. So even when it came to the corrections, I'm not advocating for them. I'm just saying that when I learned them, there was a lot of stuff like being aware of where negative associations might form, or when people were, like pinching the dog's flank and stuff, that, hey, if you're going to pinch the flank, you want to make sure that you don't get a negative association to your hands. And I'm not justifying that, but in terms of learning how to train, it could have been a lot worse, I suppose. And I did learn a lot in terms of, luring and leash skills, and I learned a lot of good things, and it was a better start than most people had, but it absolutely did go into that avenue of, first you teach the dog and then you proof it with your correction.
And let's face it, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, information wasn't as readily available. It was really hard to find research on stuff. And also, there wasn't an awareness of how is this dog really going to weather this aversive? What is going to happen other than they may possibly stop the behavior? And we both know that for a long time, and geez, it still persists, that, well, maybe this dog is just X. And while that may be true, there are some dogs who are just, okay, well, this dog is gone. They've landed a really bad bite, or they're super dog aggressive, or they're just so stressed they're just, just a puddle of fur. But a lot of dogs are blamed, as we know, and have been blamed all throughout history for being something, labeled something, as opposed to, geez, what are we doing? Can we do something better in our approach? So, I again, you can't replace history or experience, which you have. And I'm really glad to hear at least you and the people you were working with and mentoring with were cognizant of fallouts and understood the science of that quadrant, which is super. Now, how much, well, actually, let me rewind here. Let's talk about your Facebook posts, which I love, and that's how I became a fan of you, just reading your posts. You're an excellent writer. You're an excellent gatherer of your thoughts, and they're humorous and insightful, and I love them. So please don't stop posting ever, because you are great at it. But what I like is that it's not only about dog behavior, but it's also about human behavior. And you don't really get caught up in too much jargon. And, can you just explain why it's so crucial for both?
Why it's both. I think, first of all, I think where I come from with my posts, part of it, I've been told like I'm an analogy queen, is sort of what I've been called repeatedly, that I throw out these analogies yeah. And actually my editors over the years, they're like, you know what your strength is? Your ability to put an analogy in there that it's understandable. So I sort of took that and, well, I guess obviously I found that reinforcing. So I used more analogies. And now I'm very aware that analogies aren't evidence, but I do think they're really good for helping people grasp a concept. So when it comes to the person side, when I start talking about that, because I don't just talk about, on my personal page anyway, I don't just talk about the dog stuff, because I think when you start to draw people stuff in there, there's so many parallels, whether it's industry parallels, or whether it's that we can empathize with what it feels like to be the student. Because people who with dogs, they're in this interesting role where they are both the student and the teacher. So they come into a session and we are asking them to immediately grasp a concept as the student, turn that information around their head, understand it, replicate it, and mechanically execute it in a 1-hour class. The odds are astronomically stacked against us. So the better we can explain it and pull them in and say, when you feel like this, that's what the dog's feeling. Moving on, because they grasp it. So I think to me, that's part of the importance, is to get their empathy, understanding, and but to do it honestly. Like, it's not about giving analogies to sell a crap concept. This, supporting evidence has to be solid information for them. But to me, I think that's where it comes from. Or it's when, I do a lot of stuff with fitness, because over the last year I've been trying to get more fit. And even industry parallels between stuff like that. I think sometimes when you say, it's like weight loss. If you do one rep and start measuring your bicep, it's not going to happen. You need to do a lot of reps. And you need to get out there and you need to do it correctly. And you can't be sold on, fads. So people kind of go, oh, yeah, right. None of those fad diets work for me. So why would fad dog training work for me? So it's kind of in that realm where I just think, to me, it's important to also understand that human being there has so much sitting on their shoulders that I think it's stunning that they pick up for the most part, and comprehend and can execute. So, kudos to everybody who shows up to classes and puts the work in, and gets results, because it's crazy what we're actually asking of them.
I was just blown away because you just gave me some really great hooks, and one of them was you are the teacher and the student, and that is a phenomenal way to frame what we're doing, whether it's you or I or our clients or anyone. You're the teacher and the student, which is, I think, just brilliant. Love the correlation to fads, because I think things like shock collars and prong collars, now that you put it in that sort of light, are they're really fads. One of the things I always say is, before electricity and the advent of molded metal, humans and dogs existed and worked together. As a matter of fact, dogs are the first domesticated plant or animal before agriculture. Some 20,000 years before we were farming, we had dogs. So that is phenomenal. And I love the fact that, and I wouldn't expect anything else, but that you really, you give those people credit for showing up and coming to class. And, and I always thank and always let everybody know who attends puppy classes just how much they've improved. Always. Because even if they're not, 10 steps ahead of when they came in, the 2 or 3 steps ahead that they are is enough of a foundation. And, like you said, they showed up and we got stuff accomplished, which really is kind of astronomical when you think about it. 6 dogs in a room with 12 people, myself and an assistant. I don't know what your dynamic is for a class, but yeah, it's very challenging sometimes. So awesome. Great.
Yeah. And it's not just the dog's progress. I think sometimes, it's great to see progress in the dog, but reality is when they leave, it's the human progress, where if they've picked up a skill and they know how to execute it, and I can trust them to go home and practice it correctly, where it's that reinforcement for, how you just changed your timing there? That was what I wanted. Because it doesn't matter if the dog picked up at that moment, they fix their mechanical mistake, they go home and practice it correctly. I know when they come back next week, that dog will have it.
Oh, yeah,
right?
because they're intrinsically tied, human behavior and dog behavior.
Right.
If you change human behavior, it's going to work. If you change human behavior, the dog behavior will follow suit. Always, always,
exactly.
always.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, it's less about reinforcing the dog's progress, because honestly, when I'm teaching them, I can't actually, I reinforce the dog with the cookies or the toy. I still have to reinforce the human somehow, and the human is reinforcing with the cookies and the toys, because it's the human that has to show up. So, and by reinforcing, I mean, I'm not talking about handing out Smarties in class, but I think we have to really say to ourselves, when somebody shows up to class, they do something right, am I clear in telling them what they've done spectacular, not even spectacular, even better, to say, you know what you changed right there? That was what I wanted. That was excellent. So they can take that information and adjust further. Because without that feedback, it's like getting a test and it says 67. You say, well, what did I do right and wrong? And they say, we're not telling you.
Yeah, right.
Like, what use is that other than, I don't know?
Right. Well, it's a very interesting teaching parallel, because I taught music for many years, and I know you're a musician as well. And it's the same thing where, if you play a scale or a passage or chords to a metronome or something like that, and you're not doing it well as a student, you want the instructor to say, okay, well, hold on a second, maybe we'll lower the tempo, or maybe we'll adjust your fingering, or however you need to make the metrics of that work. You focus on that. And in dog training, if the dog has got a better recall, the people are reinforced because the dog's doing what we want the dog to do. And again, we'll just end this by saying, in the immortal words of Dr. Susan Friedman, behavior's in the environment, not in the dog, and humans are the variable. So I always tell my clients, focus on your behavior, focus on the environment, not the dog so much. We already know what he or she is going to do or not do. So if we're already planning on how to approach the event, it's going to be much more successful. Now, how much of the dog training market and the culture in Ontario is pain trainers, and how much are positive trainers?
Well, Ontario's huge.
Okay.
Just saying, it's massive. It depends where you go.
Jersey's huge too, and I could say that it's probably 50-50.
Yeah, I would say it depends how you define those terms.
Okay, trainers using fear and force, dominance, that whole school, versus trainers who are using food, toys, access, clickers, markers, positive trainers. Or, if you don't know, I understand, because, Ontario is huge. I'm just taking an educated guess, having been in the New Jersey, New York market for 12 years now. I'd say it's kind of split down the middle, and I'm only basing that on behavior intake forms from what people have tried, what people were told, what TV shows they watched, what trainers they worked with. So what's Ontario like? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, the thing is there's so much variety. So if you look at, let's say, Toronto, I find they're very receptive to positive reinforcement. There's a ton of great positive reinforcement trainers there. Here in London, honestly, I think that the force trainers have really struggled over the last while, and part of it is I think we've got a real dynamic sort of marketing environment, like the positive reinforcement trainers, like they go at it, which is good, because if you don't sell it, nobody's going to buy it. So that's part of it, and I don't want to I'm not going to just say I toot my own horn, but I've kind of gone after the media aspect in terms of writing and stuff. So it's hard to, when you're the voice of it in the papers, it takes a little bit of the oomph out of it, sort of in this area. Now,
I totally know what that's like, because I'm in the media here a lot, and I think that's amazing that you're taking that. And I mean, if you're comfortable, then obviously you're very comfortable. But in general, if trainers are comfortable with that, I say they should hustle after media day and night.
Yeah, and so I think it depends which area you're in. In this area, like I said, I think some of the typical, and I'm not going to name names, but those sort of names of big brand businesses that are associated with these straight up, chokes, prongs, stuff like that, I would say they have a real rough go of it around here. You just don't hear it. Plus, we have there's one fantastic rescue that's huge, and they came out probably about 15 years ago, and they came out strong with, we want positive reinforcement. And then actually, came about because one of their dogs got messed up really bad by, one of the prominent force trainers. So their dogs in the area, automatic puppy classes, positive reinforcement. So around here, there's this strong voice for positive reinforcement. However, if you drive an hour away, sort of into a little bit more of the rural areas, you have an almost complete flip.
And isn't that interesting? Yeah. Wow.
It's very difficult
Wow.
to get. Now it's starting to go there, which is great, to the point where it's like just really difficult even for people who adopt animals from this rescue to find trainers who can work with certain problems who are positive reinforcement based. So it can flip dynamically, like even within 1 hour drive from what you have versus what you don't have, like a complete flip. I would say the biggest issue right now, though, that we have, it's that we have people marketing as positive reinforcement who are not. And that is a big problem. And I don't know if it's in the area we've gotten such a strong voice for, you must use positive reinforcement from, this big rescue and a few others. And we have these strong voices in sort of the training community that now there are kennels and trainers who are coming out full force. We're positive reinforcement, and they're using all the right terms, all the right words, and you go at them and you kind of check them out and you're like, are they good? Everything is exactly by the book on all their marketing material, and they will flat out lie if you ask them, the kind of information about what they do. And then don't you know it, you start to see them on the intake sheets, and it's like they were told to put a prong on, shock collar, prong, shock collar. It's like solid gun. And you got the dogs from the kennels coming in hand shy, and the people are saying, yeah, they just grab them. And so I think that's where it heads into. So I think it's interesting because the worry that I have is that moving forward, people sign up for what they think are positive reinforcement-based classes. They go to somebody who's been deceptive. They don't actually do positive reinforcement or don't do it well, and they get told that they need the force, and they don't. And then when it fails them, the problem is positive reinforcement is the thing that gets a bad rap.
Well, what I find... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. So I'm concerned because part of it is, we need transparency because, look, if somebody's failed by well-done positive reinforcement, whoa, first of all, okay, let's see what's going on here. But it's unfair to tarnish positive reinforcement and well-done classical conditioning.
Well, it's also false marketing, right? It's false marketing because if you say you use positive reinforcement, then that means you're using something that positively reinforces behavior you want increased. Okay, box checked. But if you also use negative reinforcement and positive punishment, then you need to put that on the sheet for people to look at when they're seeing what your services are and what you may do. And that goes back to transparency, and it also goes back to, I think, a lot of dog trainers, and I'm going to put them in quotes, will take anything that can bring somebody through the door because they have to pay their bills. And I think that we are in, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately as far as businesses, because I've been doing a lot of studying about business and marketing and so forth. And we are in a business that I believe is akin to childcare or child education. And if you are molesting children, I'm not doing business with you. And if you're kicking dogs and shocking them and stringing them up, and you're telling people the dog has a moral imperative to dominate you, and you have to be strong and show this dog, you are abusing and you're lying, and it's no different than coercing people and abusing their children because dogs are innocent. We know this through scientific study that dogs only have the cognition at best of a 3-year-old child. So it's so wrong on so many levels. And what I find interesting is if you go an hour outside of a metropolitan area, things get a little bit more backward. And I think that, and I always say that dogs and dog training has a lot to do with culture. And I think that when you get away from the inner cities and the more metropolitan areas, people are probably going to be a little less up to speed. Again, not trying to generalize. I'm sure there's fabulous people who live in the rural areas of every place in the world, so nobody get mad. But I think that if we did sort of some research with people who are in metropolitan areas and said, hey, what do you know about towns, 50 miles out and their culture, I think we would find a lot of similarities. Now, what's also interesting is Toronto just had a couple of pretty big things happen in dog culture. One, they instituted a pit bull and dog breed ban, a type ban, really. I spoke with a great advocate on 8 Limbs, Sabrina Mignacca, about that, and she gave us a lot of great detail. And they also just overturned the law that said you can't use prong and choke collars. So give us a little bit of perspective on the prong and the choke law being overturned, because you just wrote an article on that.
Yeah, what happened? Well, now I write in advance when I write for the paper. So when I wrote that column, the prongs and chokes had been banned. And then a few days later, maybe a week later, the article came out saying that the ban had been overturned. But I've already submitted my column. And so it sort of reads a little wonky in terms of timeline when you sort of look through it. And it had already gone to press, so I couldn't pull it back. So basically, it's not quite that it's been overturned, it's that they're reviewing whether to overturn it. Now, how they're going to do this in terms of a process, I don't know. And whether people will be, how they're going to be sort of dealing with it, I don't know. But, my editor and I talked, and we sort of said, the information that was in the column that I wrote, which was, hey, if you're dependent on these tools and they've been banned, well, here's some other options for you. That information is valuable whether there's a ban or not, so it doesn't really matter. So that's kind of where that column came from and why it sort of stayed. We weren't so concerned about pulling it because it wasn't a matter of talking about the ban. My understanding is, according to the news stories, that it was actually the service dog organizations that really sort of kicked up a fuss, saying that they were incapable of training to the standards they needed without these tools. So it seems to me, sort of as an outsider sort of reading that what the politicians now have in front of them is you have people saying these tools are, we shouldn't be using them. They're a welfare issue, but also there's dangers associated to them. So when you get these side effects, there's risk, and that risk with a dog can involve a bite to a person or, a child or another animal. So, there's a reason to consider banning them, but I think the dilemma they faced was now you have people with disabilities need service animals, and they're being told that the job cannot be done without these tools. So I think as politicians, they're probably looking at this as we can't impair the needs of people with disabilities. So that's kind of how I'm looking at where things sit right now. Now, I don't agree with that. I think part of it is what politicians need to first do is say, well, let's reach out to different organizations, because I know there are organizations out there that don't use these tools. So if it's a false statement to say that we need them, well, then we need to sit there and right. So, yeah. And it is. It's
there's no personally and professionally, behaviorally, psychologically, ethically, like for every reason, I cannot find a reason why you should choke or shock or hit a dog. I've racked my brain. I've tried to be super objective, and I can't. And especially, like I said earlier, like historically, humans and dogs have been together for a long time and way before electricity. So way before metal to choke. So to me, it's anathema as it is to you. Like there's so many better ways to approach this.
Well, and it flies in the face of the argument that's usually used. The argument that's usually used for these tools is some dogs are so bad off or so stubborn or so dominant, they need it, right? So that's a typical argument. The problem with this is now you have service dog organizations who have breeding programs of, Goldens usually. Goldens that are so biddable, they're really not what I would call challenging dogs. And I can say that because I have done puppy programs for service dog organizations. And when I say putting together a group of service dog golden puppies, it's like, wow, this is boring. because they're just so easy compared to your typical class dynamic. So you have the easy dogs that are purpose-bred. If the dog does not meet the standard, they don't go into the program for further training. So you have a rejection rate. So it's not like, keep the dog or it dies. It's keep the dog or it gets rehomed. So you have every single out in terms of the easy dogs bred correctly, and on top of it, people claiming to be the best of the best trainers in the world because they train service dogs, and that in that dynamic you need force to get results. It doesn't make sense logically to line all that up.
No, and again, I think I always say dogs are conduits of the truth, and we all know, everybody who's awake and paying attention, that sometimes the truth is buried by a lot of noise and static and so forth. And I think that we're all of us on the positive side, the scientific side, the non-force side. We're on the right side of history, and we know it. That's why, at least for myself, I'm not worried about all these things. I'm worried in the sense that I don't want to see dogs get hurt, and I don't want to see people waste their time and money. But I know that it's just a matter of time before everyone figures this out, and this, and it's just a matter of time. I definitely hope that they do ban prong collars and shock collars everywhere. To be honest, I hope they just get rid of them. And, yeah. So let's move on. Let's talk about a post that you made tonight, as a matter of fact. And it's about filming dog training. So give us a little backdrop on that and how it came about. And what I'll do is, if you don't mind, when I release this, I'll go ahead and grab a screen grab of that post. So, it'll be there while we're talking about this. So talk to me about the post you made about filming dog training.
Okay. So when I wrote the collar article, which I thought was actually rather mild in terms of what I was saying, my column was basically, if you've got chokes and prong collars and this is what you're using to get loose leash walking and now it's banned, what are you going to do? And so I had gone through and said, well, there's other alternatives. Martingales weren't banned. And I made the case that if fitted correctly, they shouldn't be choking the dog, that they should be fitted correctly. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting heated about this one, man. Or there was other options such as harnesses, and obviously to be very careful with the brand that you pick, because some do cause abrasions. They need to be fitted correctly, and even if need be, a head halter. But it was really important to make sure they were, dogs were counter conditioned and trained to wear them and like them. So I did the whole gamut of here's some other options. Because I agree that sticking a head halter on the dog and just kind of going get them used to it is bad, right? But then at the end I said, but consider this, that maybe you should use training. It's kind of what you should be doing if you want loose leash walking, train your dog. That all of these things, if they're sitting there as a crutch, that's what they're acting as, and you're constantly dependent on it. So why not do some training and actually teach your dog to stay next to you? And that way it's not a collar issue. So I'm not against the use of some no-pull aids. I think they can be very beneficial, especially when it's a safety issue. However, I'm a big fan of training for obvious reasons. So I got heated feedback sent to my inbox, which is fine and happens from time to time. They're allowed to express their opinion. But what I thought was interesting is the main comment was that I was bashing force trainers, which I was kind of scratching my head thinking, I don't recall doing that. The other part of it was that, that positive reinforcement training and this, that it doesn't work with real dogs, and it doesn't work with this, and you can't do this, and you can't do a lot of can'ts. And that I should have video proving that I'm successful, I can successfully train a dog. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to do that. Number one, putting dogs out online, I'm especially in Ontario because we have the van. So you take a little mixed breed dog who's got a square head or something, and you put them on there saying, look at my video of these dogs. Next thing you know, somebody sees it because the dog's a little reactive, calls animal control. Next thing you know, it's labeled as a pit bull, and that's a dead dog. So I'm very hypersensitive to that sort of notion of what goes on here. But the other part of it, too, is you're in this sort of relationship with your client where you're in a position of power. And it can make people uncomfortable when you say, can I video you and your dog? And I want to use it for my own purposes. So I tend to kind of back off on that. But I know sometimes it's fine. It's not like, somebody's had success and they go, look at our success. I sent you video, and they're openly sharing with you. That's great. But I'm very hypersensitive to my first and foremost thing is with the dogs and the clients, meeting their needs and not making them feel uncomfortable, and also in representing things in a way that's accurate. So one of the things I like about your videos, you don't present them in a way of, here's their before, and we wow the dog up to show how bad he is, and 1 hour later, here he is lying on his side, and it's like, oh my God. It presents such a false picture. I mean, sheer exhaustion from being pushed over the edge accounts for that. And to me, this idea of what is evidence, what is it that makes us successful, I think we have to start challenging this notion of show your results and this 10-minute results and show me video evidence, because people see that. And I think in this industry, we're selling, for the most part, relief to owners, especially the force trainers. People come in, they have a problem with their dog. That's what motivates them. It's kind of like you have an ache or pain and you want some sort of relief and you want it now. So that force training methodology, it sort of lends itself to marketing, like, yeah, relieve your pain, I'll fix this problem. Look, 1 hour fix on this dog. Instead of selling excellence, which will also give you relief.
And truth. We talked about that, just a moment ago, selling truth. And, one of the things that I use video for is to tell my clients, and I put this right in their services when they book me, is that I film the session so I have 100% accuracy in the evaluation of your dog. As we talked about earlier, before we started the show officially, I had a client on Saturday. Today's Sunday. I had a client today, Sunday. I'm going to start writing my reports on Monday. I may not get to the second client until Tuesday. And again, as I said to you earlier, I don't look back at every second of every video, but I definitely will peek into certain points and watch what happened, what I could have done better, how close or how far away something was, or, what was going on with the dog or me or whatever. So in that case, I actually use video in that way as a marketing tool, because I'm using it to make sure that I am held to the highest standard because it's on film. And also if there's any questions, and I'm sure all dog trainers have experienced this. You said at the session, but. Okay, no problem. I will give you a free session. Here's when I'm available. I will bring the video, and we can watch the entire session, and you let me know what I said and what I didn't say, etc. And that only happened one time, and the person said, never mind. Because they knew deep down inside they were just emailing me and complaining, because I had already explained to them before I even said we can do a free session, you can watch the video. Well, have you been doing this? Have you been doing that? So the idea of fixing a problem for a dog in 10 minutes is ridiculous, because behavior is in the environment, not in the dog. And my analogy is it's like sports. A basketball team may win by 30 points against one team, but the next night maybe they lose by 10 or they win by 2. The bottom line is that every single training environment that's not been generalized by the dog. So, okay, great, the dog's fantastic in your living room, in your backyard. What happens when you go down to the football field to watch the game? And if the dog's fabulous there, great. Maybe you have an easy dog. Maybe you're a good trainer. But the bottom line is behaviors in the environment. So that's why I always tell people, do not send your dog away to a boot camp. A, they're going to do really harsh, bad things to your dog and shut them down because they want to hand you back a dog who is so scared and so shut down that the mere idea of you doing something, even a hate, is going to get the dog to go, okay. So that's number one. Number two, dogs don't generalize well. They're great discriminators. And unless that boot camp is 100% force-free, positive, they're going to take care of your dog better than you. Great. Send your dog away while you're on vacation. That's a great option. But you're absolutely right. A lot of these people, and it's in America as well as Canada, I'm sure everywhere, it's quick fix. We can do it in an hour. And then what happens is you or I get that case a month later, and the people have been choking their dog, yelling at their dog, or not doing anything. And now it's just compounding the problem that they could have had the dog and the people been in the room with somebody who knew what they were doing and explaining things properly and showing them how to do things without force and fear, that, I feel your exasperation. I go through it all the time and just shake my head going, Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, and it's not the owners that bother me, because I think that most of them,
Agreed.
generally, you give them a solution, a
Agreed.
plan, and they're willing to come. Most of them, I find my clients are awesome. It drives me nuts when I see trainers complaining bitterly about their clients. It's like, then get out of the industry because something's wrong, or learn how to handle people. Because if you're continuously saying, I have, all these clients are all non-compliant, well,
you're not selling it. You're not selling it. You're not.
Right.
If your clients are not compliant and they're not emailing you and you're not offering email support, you're not selling it. Now, personally, I have had, I don't know, roughly about 8 or 9, 10 trainers who wanted to shadow me, talk to me, come watch me train, etc., watch classes. And, the biggest problem that I find most dog trainers that I have, a relationship with or at least get to know a little bit is, honestly, it's on the selling it side. It's convincing the people this is the way to go, because they're going to have their neighbor, their friend, the last trainer is going to email them again. There's going to get all this information. And what I always say is block out the distortion. If you have a question, email me. I don't have what's my agenda? I'm not charging you for email support. And I can, I always tell my clients, I can air traffic control a lot of stuff. If I need to see you, I'll say, we got to book a session. If I don't need to take your money, I won't. And that's just the way I run my business. I know of some trainers, they're like, well, I need to see you for 10 times for, $1,000. And it's like, okay, well, maybe, but if you can't get it done in a session or two and some email support, maybe you don't really know that much about behavior and training. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I have people, especially with puppies. It's like every week or two I get a little private message from them. Is this normal for them at this age? Is this normal?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm going to answer that question. I'd rather you reach out to me.
Yep.
It's a simple thing. It's like, yeah, it's normal, or not, and we have to get together. But I'd rather you that than to go online and freak yourself out and start disciplining and punishing the dog for something that's a normal dog behavior. So, yeah, that kind of stuff. But I think that's where it starts to really drive me nuts, because of that release problem in selling. You're really selling people on the idea that they have to put the effort in. So it's like selling them the idea that you have to eat healthy, exercise, do cardio, and some weights, and some stretching. And it's like, well, why should I do that? Are they doing it because they fear, a heart attack and the doctor scared them? Or are they doing it because it's a way of life that's positive and feels good? Is the owner acting from a personal sense of negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement? So when it comes to the training, one of the things that drives me nuts is when it's like, well, maybe it's negative reinforcement, but at least he's quiet and I'll take that. It's better than what I have. And it's like, no, actually it's not better, because now you have a ticking time bomb.
And even if you don't, right? So let's just say that, a dog has, had their neck popped by a prong collar enough times where the person, the owner, whatever, guardian, however you want to term that person with the dog, doesn't have to do it, to the extent where they're causing the dog fear or pain. They're just sort of giving the dog a little warning. That's stressful. My analogy is this. I punch you in the face really hard one time, and then every other time I just sort of lean in and let you know I might do it again. That's abuse. Yeah, it's like that's abuse.
Was that Biff? Was it Biff in Back to the Future where he did that all the time? Where it's like, "Ooh, I'm gonna punch you," kind of thing, and everybody flinches, right?
Right. That's what it is.
I think that was the movie, and it's that everybody flinches because they're expecting him to hit because he's done it in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but it just. It drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely crazy.
Well, it drives us crazy because we know there's an alternative. We know there is an alternative, and we're tired of seeing dogs ruined or having to spend 1 second being afraid. And we know that a dog can land, 25 bites in 4 seconds. I use that all the time with my clients. Well, if you keep doing this, right? So if I get a client who's really been giving the dog fear and pain, and maybe they've bitten, or they've almost bitten, and there's an issue. I said, a dog can land 25 bites in 4 seconds, right? And then maybe they won't bite you. You have a lot in the bank. You're the dog's main people. But what about your friends and family? What about a child who runs up on you? So if you want to risk that, keep doing this, be prepared to get sued or your dog to be euthanized and people to be mad at you, or you can change your behavior. You can help this poor dog feel better about life. And I tell people, look, associative learning is safe, unsafe, neutral. That's what the dog processes all stimuli as. And we want the wheel, when it starts spinning, which one is it? Safe, unsafe, neutral. We want it to land on safe and neutral if possible. Because it may start as, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I okay? I don't think people understand that dogs are biological entities. I really do. I think there is this disconnect and, it's a lab, so it should, or it's this and it shouldn't. And I've been saying lately, and I have to write a blog or something called "Dogs Are Not Clocks." If you open up a Timex watch and you give it to a reputable watchmaker, they'll fix it. It's a Timex, right? And I don't care if it was made in 1952 or 1972. But a dog has second to second emotions and feelings, and people need to learn. People not only need to learn that, they need to respect that. I know you agree.
I agree 1,000%. Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on 8 Limbs. This has been the longest interview that I've done for 8 Limbs, and I think so far my favorite. Not a diss to any of the other fabulous guests I've had, but I've just had such a fantastic time speaking with you. Again, love what you're doing. Love all your posts, and I wish you just oodles and oodles of success, and I hope you take all the business from all the pain trainers, and I hope they change their ways. I hope they change their ways and they help dogs because we want dogs to get help. But thank you for being a guest. I really
thank you for
appreciate it.
having me, and I'm sure we'll be chatting a lot more. Yeah, absolutely love it. Thanks for having me.
Without a doubt, you got it. Well, thanks everybody for listening to 8 Limbs. This episode, we've been speaking with the fabulous Yvette Van Veen. Please tune in again next time. I've been your host, Drayton Michaels. Take care of yourselves, and remember, if you want positive results, use positive training.